Now I should. Yes, I should.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. And everyone, thank you again for being here. Richard Falcon, founder and executive director of Teatro Nahual. We are a Latino-based theater company focusing on theater, focusing on social justice theater, focusing on education, focusing on organizing artists in general. And it gives me great pleasure to be in partnership here with the great folks from Art Tonic as we have the opportunity to do this individual artist fellowship. Now, what is the individual artist fellowship? It is something that cycles every 2 years with the California Arts Council, where throughout the 8 regions in California. We are the capital region, but throughout the 8 regions in California, we put together a very, very competitive grant opportunity to award individual artists at the legacy level, established level, emerging level. I'm not going to go too much into the detail on those pieces here because you'll read about those in the guidelines. And as we go through other webinars that are going to help you to navigate the grant and some of the questions in there as well, uh, there is probably a great deal that you're going to have questions about. The grant opens May 4. It closes June 5, if I remember correctly in there. And during that time, we are going all over Solano, Yolo, El Dorado, Alpine, Sacramento County to talk to groups individually, also doing one-on-one sessions. You'll see later that Bernie will share calendar connections so that you can have some time with me, have some time with Justina as we take you through this. I'm very, very excited to do this because I think we're the first like non-agency to get an opportunity to do this. And I was always one of those people that complained like, oh, your grant process is so horrible. Oh, it's just not inclusive. Oh, I never get this anyway, so why am I doing this? And I always complained about those things. So I think they kind of said, okay, Richard, fine, you do it then. And it is hard. It is hard. So I'm going to ask for your grace as we go through this process in here. But I'm so looking forward to getting to know each of you in there. And so if you have any questions, of course, you can reach out to that IAF at teatronagual.com email box. You can set up calendar invites for us to have discussions. Also, if you look at the website, you'll see that there are various in-person things that are going on. Like, for example, I will be this Saturday at La Cultura Bookstore. Bernie is going to be at Solano. In case you Solano people are here at Arts Benicia. Tomorrow, we're going to be at Arts Benicia at 5 o'clock answering questions too. I'm going to be at the Shingle Spring Band of Miwok Indians in Placerville on Sunday. So we're making the rounds, going every place that we can to try to talk to you one-on-one. So thank you all very, very much. And with that, Art Tonic, I'm going to turn it back over to you to talk about grant writing in general. That will lead up eventually with the other sessions to more specifics on the grant itself. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much, Richard. And also, there will be an opportunity at a later slide to see all of the IAF email, the QR codes for future workshop registrations, and the Calendly scheduler that you guys can check out in order to schedule one-on-ones with Richard or Justina. So I am going to go back to sharing my screen. See. And then I'm going to go back on presentation mode. Perfect. All right, so let's dive into it. Here are some of the workshop goals for today. We're going to learn how to identify and evaluate grants and opportunities to determine if they are the best fit for your practice. We're going to show you what materials you'll need to have ready to apply for these grants, understand how to answer common grant application questions, learn how to translate your notes and ideas into complete and compelling answers, get familiar with a step-by-step editing process, and gain confidence in submitting an impactful application that represents you and your art in the best possible light. Um, Justina, I think you're muted.
Hello. So I'm Justina, the co-director, one of the co-directors at Tonic. So I will talk a bit about the types of different artist grants that you'll come across as you do your search. So you'll generally find three different types of grants, and these are project grants, general support grants, and fellowships. Project grants are to achieve a specific artistic outcome, like a project or artwork series, or public service, like a community event. The funds for these grants are limited to a specific project, and you'd likely have to include a project budget in your application and adhere to that budget throughout your project. There are some requirements and restrictions. As an awardee of a project grant, you would be required to provide proof that you completed the project. You would probably have to submit receipts for your expenses or invoices. Your use of funds must align with the budget that you proposed. And these grants may require a fiscal sponsor. Some examples of organizations that offer project grants are the California Arts Council and the NEA. Next, there's general support grants. So these grants are to support the overall sustainability and development of your practice. General support grants could be awarded to individual artists or organizations. These grants provide flexible funds for your artistic career, and they're also not project specific. So you can use them for anything related to your artistic practice, whether that's your studio or your materials. These grants come with the requirements of proof that they are supporting your artistic practice. They're usually based on artistic merit and your prior body of work, and they are often financial need based. Some of these types of grants include the Pollock Krasner Foundation Grant and the Gottlieb Foundation Individual Support Grant. Those are both national grants. Finally, fellowships. Fellowships is a type of grant that the California Arts Council is offering that Teatro Nogual is administering. Fellowships are specifically for individual artists. They provide uninterrupted time, space, and validation for artistic creation. The focus of this funding is that it covers the cost for you to have time and space to make art. The funds are often flexible and allowed to be used for things like living expenses and utilities. Requirements and restrictions for fellowships are generally that they are meant to support your artistic practice in general. They are based on artistic merit and prior body of work. And they usually require a dedication of time during the residency and fellowship period where you'll be expected to check in with your fellow fellows or with the grant administrators. So some examples of this is the California Arts Council Individual Artist Fellowship, the City of Sacramento Creative Growth Fellowship, the Guggenheim Fellowship, and the McDowell Fellowship. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and Richard will flag any questions that come up. And then we'll also have some time after the presentation to go through some questions. Okay, so there are a number of materials that you will be asked to provide or upload on applications. These include your artist statement, your bio, your CV, a project proposal, project budget, work samples and work sample descriptions, documentation of your residence, documentation of your income, and reference letters. Not all applications require every one of these And sometimes, like a project grant, they might require all of them or they might require some of them. But these check marks are in general what we've seen as common trends for what is required. So in our case, I think most of us are interested in applying, or most of you are interested in applying to the California Arts Council Fellowship. The bottom row is what you would be likely required to submit, though for this fellowship, they do not require a reference letter. Next slide. So through our years of applying for grants ourselves and helping others apply for grants, we have found that there are common questions and topics that come up repeatedly. Now, they'll never be the exact same question because that would be too easy. So grants always tend to ask similar questions in different ways, in different confusing, complex ways, which is always a fun uh, activity, I guess. I'm being sarcastic. But we're here to help demystify these questions and help you break them down and learn how to answer them to the best of your ability. So the first topic that we have found common on grant applications is artistic merit and context. So this is the what and why of your artwork. Some subcategories of this include practice and technique, conceptual depth, and your current work. So under practice and technique, the grantors are looking to evaluate your artistic methods, materials, and processes. You might be asked to place your work in context. You might be asked about what techniques do you use in your work? What are the main influences upon your work? Tips for answering. It's always best to be specific, include specific techniques. If it's a technique that's very specific to your discipline, be sure to give a brief definition because not all of the panelists are going to be familiar with your specific discipline. And explain why your techniques are important for your art, for your artistic concepts. And I just wanted to make a note, I'm reviewing this. I'm not going to read every single thing that's on these slides, but Bernie sent you these slides before the workshop, so you'll have access to go in here and read through all of this on your own too, and then you can ask us any questions if you have them. So the second subcategory of artistic merit is conceptual depth. So this is to prove that your work is intellectually rigorous and informed by research. So for this category, they might ask you to describe your artistic concepts, influences, philosophy, and or visions that shape your work. On this California Arts Council Fellowship, there's a question that asks, describe your artistic practice, media, and ideas that drive your work. And tips for answering this are to describe how your art fits into a historical context. So for example, if you are a landscape, Northern California landscape photographer, you might discuss the tradition of landscape photography very briefly and how your work expands that discipline. You might name specific influences like artists or even scientific concepts that inspire your work. And make sure that if you're naming influences, to make the specific connection to your own artwork. It should all always go back to your artwork. And then the last subcategory of this topic would be what you're working on currently. So this is really to confirm that you're actively making art. Some questions in this category include, what are you currently working on? It's pretty straightforward. And if it's a project-based grant, they'll ask you for the title and the project description. So to answer this, you would describe your current focus or your current body of work. Make sure to include how it connects to your past work and that it's not just coming out of nowhere. And provide some details about your current series. So the next topic that we found common on grant applications is about your past achievements and your future goals. So where are you coming from? and where are you going? So the subcategory past achievements, the grantor is really looking to see how professional you are and how much career momentum you have. They want to see a trajectory of you developing your artistic practice. So questions related to this category could be provide an artist narrative, provide, which is like a story of your career, provide an artist statement, which is more about your artwork itself. And then another question that was on a grant was, what are your main achievements from the past 2 to 5 years? So tips for answering this is to list any exhibits you had, commissions, residencies, awards. Focus on achievements that show a clear upward professional trajectory. The next subcategory of this would be future plans. So they want to know that you have ability to plan for long-term growth. Some questions we've come across have been, what are your artistic goals for the next 1 to 5 years? List 3 to 5 steps or actions that you plan to take over the next 12 months to achieve your goals. So once again, it's helpful here to be really specific. And there's something called SMART goals, goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant to your practice, and time bound. So for instance, an example would be, I have a goal to complete a ceramics residency, specific, outside of California in 2026. And maybe to be more specific, I have a goal to complete a ceramics residency to build on my wheel throwing skills outside of California in 2026. And then another tip is to list the concrete actions you will take to get there. So if my goal is to get that ceramics residency, I'll be researching ceramics residencies outside of California. I'll be making sure I have high quality photos of my ceramics. Everything I would tell them what I plan to do to get this residency. Finally, the last subcategory of this topic is use of funds. So they really want to know that you'll be putting the grant funds to good use. So an example of this is on the fellowship that we're here for tonight, is how will the Capital Region Individual Artist Fellowship impact you personally, artistically, and professionally? They're really asking you, how are you going to use this money that we're giving you in these 3 ways. So be specific about what the funds will allow you to do that you couldn't do if you didn't have this grant. For example, could you buy art materials, use it for fabrication, shipping art to galleries that are outside your region, etc. For this fellowship is very community engagement focused, so I would suggest that you talk about how the funds will help you engage with the community, whether that's renting a space from a nonprofit organization or using it for other event expenses or anything that will get you out in community. Next. The final topic that we've identified as a common grant topic is impact and community. And this is a big one for the California Arts Council Individual Artist Fellowship. They are really looking to award artists that make an impact on community and inspire social change. So the first subcategory within this topic is community or social relevance. And this is really for the grantor to see that your work has a public benefit and aligns with their values. So for this fellowship, there are 2 questions related to this. They are, describe how your work engages community, and has your work influenced social change on a local, regional, or statewide level? Describe how. So some tips for answering this is, once again, to be specific. Include who you partner with, a school, a specific community group, a city agency, anyone that you partner with that helps you reach more community members. Also, explain the change or impact your art makes or you'd like to make with your art in the community. The next subcategory for this is vibrancy. This is kind of a vague category, and I suggest that artists be creative when answering this. There's not really one right way to answer this question. but it's really about showing how your art contributes to the discipline or moves it forward. So some questions you might see are, how does your work contribute to the vibrancy of the discipline? And how does your work demonstrate strong alignment with the components of the attributes of excellence in arts for change? This is a specific reading that California Arts Council wants you to reference in your application. So some tips for answering this is to think about what's unique about your use of media. Are you re-envisioning a historic art form? Are you using like an old analog photography process in a new way? Maybe I have a friend that mixes analog photography process with digital processes. And then specifically for this fellowship, I suggest choosing a few of the attributes from the reading. There's 11 that align best with your art practice to discuss. The last subcategory for questions and topics would be access. So this is really just to show how your art reaches diverse audiences and communities. Some questions under this topic could be, how do you ensure public access and exposure of your work to broad audiences? On the California Arts Council Fellowship, there's a question that asks, which cross-sector organizations at the local or regional level have you built relationships with? This can also include initiatives you are aligned with and have personally worked on. Some tips for answering this include detailing specific plans that you have for public access. It could be something like free workshops, online documentation, accessible venues. I also suggest including specific organizations or groups you have partnered with in your art practice. Examples include where you have presented workshops, exhibits, talks, etc.
Okay, so where you can find artist grant opportunities. This is just a short list of what we've come up with so far. We find a lot of grant opportunities through our city, county, or state arts council. So the California Arts Council is our state arts council. And you should all have access to this presentation, and all of these are active links. You should be able to click on the link and visit either the grant page or their website for funding opportunities. Our city or county arts, your city or county arts office, the City of Sacramento Office of Arts and Culture, Center for Cultural Innovation. I have submitted an application for a quick grant. This is a monthly rolling basis grant. I believe it is $600, and they close their application on the 15th every month. So if you are looking for some quick funding, it's a great opportunity for emerging artists as well. Alliance for California Traditional Arts, Creative Capital, Artwork Archive, and Hyperallergic are a few other websites to keep track of. Okay, so let's say you found a grant that you like. We're all here because of the California Arts Council Individual Artist Fellowship. You want to make sure that you are eligible for receiving this grant. There will be eligibility requirements outlined in the grant guidelines. These requirements may include demographic information like age, gender, race, ethnicity, artistic media, amount of experience, geographic location, subject matter of your work, and so much more. Again, I emailed everybody a copy of the grant guidelines, so please make sure that you look at the eligibility requirements for the IAF. Yay! So you found out that you're eligible for this grant. The good thing about the Capital Region, or I should say the individual artist fellowships in general, is that it is a tiered grant. So there are 3 tiers: the Emerging Artist Award, Established Artist Award, and Legacy Artist Award. So everybody on this call should be eligible for that. You want to read all of the grant information, including the requirements, guidelines, and the questions to make sure that this grant is right for your work. Outside of this fellowship, if a grant that you're applying for is project-based, you want to make sure that you have a project in mind that would be a good fit. A good thing that I like to do when I'm applying for grants is I look at past grantees to see if I am at a similar career level or if I am making similar work to the past grantees. That's usually a good indicator of whether or not you're a good fit for the grant. And applying for a grant is a lot of work. It's a lot of time. It's best to know beforehand if it's going to work out before you spend all of that precious time applying for it. So you're eligible and the grant is a good fit. A quick note before we dive into our process. At Tonic, we like to use Google Workspace to do all of our grant writing. It's an easy way to share documents, folders, and files with other people. Multiple people can work on the grant document at the same time. We can organize all of our applications on Google Drive. The workspace is free. You just need a free Gmail account, but feel free to use any other word processing software or platform. Okay, so this is the primary tool that we use for grant applications. This is the Tonic Grant Studio. I've sent everybody a copy of this. Please let me know if you did not receive it, and I will be happy to share it with you again. This Grant Studio document is separated into 4 different sections: the Pinboard, the notebook, the calendar, and the work table. And we'll dive into how we use this Grant Studio. Using the Grant Studio document, the Pinboard section is really where you put all of the basic grant information that you need to access or refer to multiple times. Grant application websites and even like guidelines have a lot of information. It's so easy to miss like important details, and it can be frustrating to like go back to the same like link every single time or the same website to find what you need. So it's best to like read through the document once, put all of that important information into the Grant Studio. So you just need to open up your Grant Studio every time you need to refer to it. I like to read the grant application at least twice. As you read, you note important information onto this Grant Studio document. Things like the grant name and the year. So if you're applying to this Individual Artist Fellowship, you're going to write CAC Individual Artist Fellowship 2026 to 2027. And then the grant application website, which is the Teatro Nagual landing page. We are not requiring a login link, name or password for this, but a lot of grant portals will have you log into their platform. So if you are not comfortable putting your login credentials on a Google Doc, we suggest using a secure password manager like LastPass, which keeps all of your passwords in one platform. And as long as you're logged in to LastPass, it will autofill your login credentials. And most importantly, you want to make sure that your Grant Studio has the deadline and the time for the deadline. In the notebook section of the Grant Studios, where you'll keep all of the important information from the grant application website, it will save you some time having to go back. Things like who is eligible. So you would refer to the grant guidelines. You're making live changes? Okay. I believe that Justina is adding the eligibility requirements from the Individual Artist Fellowship right now for you to reference. So you would need to write who is eligible for the grant, what it funds, what it doesn't fund, the rubric and criteria, and the grant amount. So this fellowship funds anywhere between $5,000 to $50,000, $5,000 for emerging artists, $10,000 for established artists, and $50,000 for legacy artists. Upload materials. You're going to want to upload documents, images that they're requesting, any additional important information like the grant contact name. The email address for the IAF is listed here. It's also listed in one of the last pages of this slide. So the calendar section of the Grant Studio document. A strong grant application can take anywhere between 20 to 25 hours to complete. You want to give yourself enough time to do at least like multiple drafts of your application. So if you have 4 weeks to complete your application, reserve about 5 to 6 hours per week to work on it. Plan to submit your grant at least 2 to 3 days before the official deadline. I know that I certainly sometimes cut it to the last minute. The reason why we encourage you to leave some space between submitting your application and the deadline is if there are any technical issues that arise, you'll want to reach out to the grant email to make sure you get the help that you need to sort out any technical issues or any clarification that you might need to have. This schedule focuses only on writing the grant answers. Set your own deadlines for images and any additional requested materials such as artist CV or bio. So on our Grant Studio, we have things like when the starting date for your application. You can give yourself due dates for when you write drafts for each questions. You can give yourself a due date for your first draft, your second draft, when you want the final draft to be completed, and when the grant needs to be submitted. All of this can be customizable, but it's here for you if you would like to use this process. So using the Grant Studio document and note-taking steps. First, you want to copy and paste the grant questions directly from the application and add the character limit or word count under each question so you'll know how much detail you can put in your response. A good length is about the same amount as the word count or character count that you're allotted. And also you want to take into consideration the grant panelist who's going to read your response. So writing a response that maximizes the word count or character count that you're allotted just gives them as much context into your work as possible. Grant questions often have more than one question that's written in that same question. Separate each question into multiple parts to ensure that you answer every part of it. You will likely lose points depending on the rubric. You will likely lose points for incomplete answers, and it's not fair that grant questions are written this way, but we'll show you in following slides some examples of questions that actually have more than one question written in them. Grant questions are often complex or written in specific jargon or language that's related to a profession or field. For example, this individual artist, the Capital Region Individual Artist Fellowship, states that it would like for you to place your work in context of this document called the aesthetic attributes. There's 11 aesthetic attributes. We will be going over that in future workshops, but so this is a great example of specific jargon or specific language that's related to a grant application. You want to make sure that you read each question to make sure you fully understand everything that is being asked of you. If you don't understand a word or phrase, you can define it for yourself. But again, this is where the email comes into play. We've definitely emailed grantors before to clarify language, to clarify things about the application portal. Don't be shy and make sure you get the clarity that you need.
Okay, so I will jump in to talk about using our grant studio document or whatever document you use to break down the grant questions. So we're using an example of a question from the 2024 Creative Capital application, which is open to national artists. They offer this every year. So this is something you can look out for. I included this question because it seems really wordy and complex, but there's really two main parts of the question. So the question reads, please place your work in a context so we may better evaluate it. What are the main influences upon your work as an artist? How does your past work inform your current project? Please use concrete examples, which may include other artists' work, art movements, cultural heritage, science, philosophy, research, or work from outside the arts field, etc. That last sentence there, they're just giving you some examples of what you include. They are not asking you to include all of those things. And a hint for knowing that that is optional is that it says which may include. So this question has two parts. The first part is what are the main influences upon your work as an artist? Include examples. The second part is how does your past work inform your current project? Because this grant specifically is a project-based grant and they want you to include examples. So when they say please use concrete examples, they're referring to both of the questions in that question. And if you see, the question starts with please place your work in a context so we may better evaluate it. That's not really the question. The questions are the two that come after that. Um, so yeah, it can be a little confusing. So that's also another reason if you feel confused about the question and what parts of it you are expected to answer, to email that grant contact or go to office hours or sign up for our mentorship slot. So it's your turn. I'll give you a couple minutes to break down some questions from the 2026 Individual Artist Fellowship to give you a head start. So just take a couple of minutes to write down for yourself these two questions, break them up into their smallest parts. So this first question actually has three questions in one. How will the Capital Region Individual Artist Fellowship impact you personally, artistically, and professionally? And the second question actually has four questions in one. As an individual artist, which cross-sector organizations at the local and or regional level have you built relationships with? This can also include initiatives you are aligned with and have personally worked on. If anyone has done this, has completed, I would love a volunteer to do the first one. You would unmute yourself if you can, and then just speak up.
The first one we can break down by how it impacts you, right? So the first section would be personally, the second section would be artistically, and the third section would be professionally. And those would all be separate answers.
Perfect. Thank you, Estefania. And could I have a volunteer to break down the second question?
This one's a little tricky.
I'm gonna call on someone. Jaya, do you want to tackle this one?
I knew you were
Our
gonna call. I knew it.
fearless arts
I was
advocate,
literally
Jaya.
waiting for it. I was literally waiting for it. So I was
I had some
looking.
other people in mind, but I figured that you're the
No,
least
no, I knew
shot.
it. So I think that the questions are because there's four of them. As an individual artist, which cross-sector organizations at the local
Hmm.
level, at the regional level, and then you would also say that what initiatives you've aligned with and which initiatives have you personally worked on?
Ding, ding, ding. Good job, Jaya. Thank you for being brave and participating, even though I made you do it. So you'll see Estefania and Jaya did a great job breaking down the questions. I do just want to note there's subtle cues here. Um, this first question, you do need to answer every single part of this question because it says and. So how will it impact you personally, artistically, and professionally? The panelists are going to be looking to see that you answered all of those three aspects. And you may lose points if you do not address all three. But now the second question, there's and or, and then it says this can also include, which is kind of like the word may. So really, it's only required that you answer one of these questions, but you will have a stronger answer if you address as much of the question that you can. Does that make sense? Give me a thumbs up if it does.
Or in the chat, if you have any additional questions, please let us know.
I see there's a question in the chat that asks about what about opportunities that come outside of, I assume, the own artist local region? That is still, I would say that's still applicable because it's still at a local and or regional level. So say for this fellowship, you must have resided in California for the past 2 years, but say you lived in San Diego up until last month, it would be totally valid to include something that you did in San Diego or even another state or another country if it was something that you did that was local and or regional. But if you do have examples that are from California, I would prioritize those.
Great question. I think more questions are rolling in. I'm not able to check the chat because I'm
There are
sharing.
more questions rolling in, and Jaya does have her hand up.
Could you define initiatives?
This can also include initiatives you are aligned with and have personally worked on. Richard, do you want to take that?
Yeah.
Sure. Essentially, initiatives in there, and this is, don't let the word initiatives take you into crazy places. When we're talking about initiatives, we're talking in relation to cross-sector organizations, for example. For example, I have created work on air quality. Okay. Air quality and the area of environmental justice is a cross sector. The initiative that I might be involved in there on the cross sector is bringing awareness so people know when's the right time to wear a mask if pollution happens to be heavy in there. So really, it's really the initiative itself is what is the initiative you are trying to address, whether it's an initiative around self-care, an initiative around mental health, an initiative around how to register to vote, an initiative on how to fill in the blank. It's all of those things that are on there. And if you think of yourselves, I think many of you, as you create the art that you do in the media that you do, it's really with a purpose in mind. You're trying to bring a message across. You're really trying to address something that you think the community needs to know for whatever it might be, whether it's air quality, civic engagement, racial justice, whatever that may be in there. And so those cross-sector organizations, there's many of them in there. The initiatives really are, what is it you're trying to solve, if that makes
I
sense.
also want to chime in and say that next week we will be having an information session specific to this grant where we will dive deep into all of the questions. So
Or
this is,
yes, and feel
or
free first to sign up for, some time with Justina or time with me. We could talk about those individually, but as Justina said, there are more areas where we're going to dive into these in a lot more detail. And so, but we want to be here for you.
yeah, so this workshop, and we're happy to answer your questions, but to just stay on track, this, even though we're making this specific to the fellowship, this is more of a general workshop on applying for grants that will prepare you for all grant opportunities.
And I do want to address Charles's opportunities that Charles speaks of, that the opportunities being in the Bay Area, Oakland, Berkeley. So, Charles, I'm assuming you live in the capital region. You can feel free to come off of chat if you'd like to be able to talk
Yeah,
about.
Charles is in
yes,
Solano.
I live in Solano County
Okay,
in
super, super,
Fairfield.
super. Well, that's great because you being in Solano and these opportunities that you're working with in these areas there, that is perfectly fine that you are building for and addressing with and impacting in these other areas in here.
Yeah, I think I
Because
was just hung up on that question that says which local cross-sector organizations have you built relationships with?
yes,
Where I thought local would mean the capital region specifically.
not specifically, they could be within Solano, they can be, because if you think about the Solano is so close to the Bay Area region that's in there too. But Charles, let's talk about that. Set some time up with me and we'll talk about those a little bit more.
Okay, sounds good. I'll email you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And then I see a message from Paul. What is a cross-sector organization? A
Let's
cross,
put a Richard, let's just put a pin in this for now,
sure,
and if we
will
have
do.
time at the end, we'll go back to the this at the end because this is specific to the IAF fellowship.
Yes, exactly. Good point. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, everyone, for your really insightful questions. So can we go to the next slide? So the first thing that I do after I break down all my questions into their most simple parts, so I'm making sure that I'm answering the entire question, is I take notes, or something that Richard recommends is just journal about the question. It's going to be messy. This is your brainstorming phase. You're not going to include everything in this note taking or journaling process in your final answer, but this messy stage is essential for writing a great answer. So this is an example from my client who lives in Rhode Island. And this is a grant that the Rhode Island Arts Council offers called the Make Art Grant. So I'm just going to read you his project description just to give you some context. And then we'll get into the question that we broke down together and took notes on. So his project description is Richard Whitten will create a series of 12 paintings that will act as pages from a fictional illuminated manuscript of scientific instruments in Florence's Museo Galileo. Each page features either an instrument from the museum or one of his own invention. He seeks to blur the boundaries between scientific objects and art objects while also highlighting the Asian influences on European science. So, just for you to know, he did not write this out of nowhere. This came after extensive note taking, and I believe we wrote this after we wrote the whole application. So that's a very clean statement. It's just to give you context on what his project was. So the question that was on this grant application was describe what the project is, when and where it is happening, and who is involved in the project. and it had a character limit. Always pay attention to your word or character limits. It had a character limit of 1,000. So this one question actually had 4 questions. The first one was, what is the project? So we wrote that it's going to be pages of a catalog that are actually paintings on shape panels. They're going to be influenced by Renaissance illuminated manuscripts. 6 of the paintings are going to show instruments from the actual Galileo collection, and 6 are going to be instruments that are inspired by the collection, but from his imagination. He also plans for this project to illustrate interaction of Asian and European sources. When is it happening? Fairly straightforward. It will be completed in 2025. Where is it happening? It will open at Rhode Island College's University Bannister Gallery, followed by traveling to different venues. Who is involved? So he notes who's involved besides himself. So his designer colleague will design the catalog, and his art historian colleague is going to write the catalog essay. So after you take your notes, you've gotten past the hard part of opening the document and getting words on the page, getting your ideas out there. Now it's time to refine your ideas, to prioritize what information you want to include that meets the word count or character count limitations. I usually start in a new blank document or a new tab on my grant studio document that I call the grant canvas, to start to have like a fresh, clean start. And I'll copy my notes from the grant studio to the grant canvas that I want to include in the final draft. So I also like to decide on the format for each answer. Most artists will use essay format, which is all paragraphs without any headings. But you could also use a format where you have headings. So if your question has 3 parts, so for instance, on the California Arts Council Fellowship, there's the first question asked how the grant will impact you personally, professionally, and artistically. You could make each of those a heading to make it really, really clear for the panelists. You could also do a list. So for instance, if it asks you your goals, you might make a list of 4 goals. Or you could do, which is what I usually do, a combination of these. I choose which format seems to work best for each question. And I pass it on to Bernie.
Muted. While you're taking notes on the grant canvas, again, you want to break down the question into its simplest parts. This is actually an example from the 2024 California Arts Council Individual Artist Fellowship. The question is, describe how you engage your local community and your art making. How does your art practice include social, cultural change practice? And you're limited to 300 words for this question. So part 1 of this question is describe how you engage your local community and your art making. And part 2 is how does your art practice include social, cultural change practice? So for this question, we wanted to define social, cultural change practice before answering. Social change is defined as the alteration, transformation, or evolution of societal norms, values, behaviors, institutions, and structures over time. For example, if you're an artist activist, can use public performances to take control of the public narrative of the AIDS epidemic. For cultural change, it is defined as the transformation, modification, or evolution of the shared beliefs, customs, values, traditions, and practices within a culture. For example, the inclusion of street art culture in museum exhibits. Written in simpler terms, it basically is asking, how does your art address or impact change in society or culture? So I am using an example, my own example from my application for this year. I was lucky enough to be granted the Emerging Artist Award for the 2024 California Arts Council IAF. And for this question, this is how I took notes for this. Thank you, Justina, for this question. So question number 1, describe how you engage your local community in your art making. I knew that in my application, I wanted to focus on specific projects, mostly because I wanted to make sure that the work samples I included in the application is the work that I talked about in my application questions. And that is also like, that's probably a really good suggestion to take, is to make sure that you're referencing the artwork that you're including in your application. So I referenced an artwork called Reef, which was an immersive installation made of ceramic work, lights, and water. Participants were able to engage with the work and disrupt the work. When they engaged with the work, the installation environment changed. I also included examples from a show called Magmahal to Hold. And this provided a space for the Filipinx community to see their culture represented in a white wall gallery space. I also included comforts like Filipino food, memory-based storytelling to foster a sense of home. I engaged in a diverse audience through local exhibitions, and I also included the installation in a science conference that I applied for while I was in my senior year at Sac State. And that the feature of the piece within the science conference was a collaboration with an ecological collective called Women's Eco Arts Dialogue. Part 2 of that question is, how does your art practice include social cultural change practice? And this is how I answered it. Reef falls under environmental advocacy because the statement behind that work is to illustrate ecological displacement. It exists in the cross-sector of science and art because I exhibited it at Bioneers, A Window Through, which is an annual scientific conference in the Bay Area. Challenging institutional spaces and narratives, combating invisibility, passivity, and assimilation for the Filipinx community by including examples of a solo show called Magmahal to Hold. The entire focus of that solo show was to celebrate my culture. I also integrated my native language, Tagalog, some traditional games, and ancestral crafts in that show. So really quick, I'm going to read the final draft of my response for this question. And I just want to make it clear that this application was specific to the emerging artist tier for this grant. Also, your draft is going to look very different from my response. This is just to give you some ideas on how to approach a question like this, and provide some insight on some of the language that maybe the grant panelists are looking for. So, describe how you engage your local community in your art making. How does your art practice include social cultural change practice? In 2022, I was inspired by Southeast Asian aquatic ecosystems and fabricated an immersive installation titled Reef. It consisted of a tide pool with spotlights flooding the water and submerged reef-like sculptures that viewers could physically investigate and disrupt. By manipulating the reef-like sculptures, viewers altered the environment by catalyzing water movement and light refractions. In the instance the objects were removed from its illuminated setting, they appeared dull and isolated from the collective whole, making viewers aware of the displacement of beauty when humans encroach on the environment. I presented this installation twice. The first showing occurred at the Art Sculpture Lab in Sac State. The second showing occurred in May 2022 at the Bioneers Conference in San Francisco. In response to an open call from Women's Eco Artist Dialogue, a Bay Area ecological arts collective, I offered the installation as part of their exhibition, Art Through Action, Restoration, and Regeneration. in February, I think somebody before asked if they could include examples from other regions or other counties that is not in the capital region. So this is an example of artwork that I exhibited in San Francisco, but I still applied under the capital region fellowship. Okay. In February 2023, I held my second solo show titled Mamahal to hold at the R.W. Joyce Witt Gallery. The term is derived from my native language, which means to love dearly. The show exhibited a recent body of work combining fabrication, ceramics, printmaking, new media, and food. The exhibition included indigo monotypes, a Mancala tabletop game with freshwater pearls, an LED hibiscus flower, an altar, and a confessional made of ceramic vessels and hand-built furniture. I aim to communicate, quote, home through the recollection of memory while sharing the palpable comfort found in Filipino cuisine. I was told multiple times during the exhibition that community members had not experienced Filipinx art in the context of a white wall gallery. I'm prompted by these interactions to continue making work that disrupts a narrative of invisibility, passivity, and assimilation. And I think what made my application successful was I included some the storytelling elements in this. There are certain grants that are very formulaic and they require you to include like a ton of research, right? Prove that you did research on your work. The focus of the individual artist fellowship is for you to communicate how your work impacts community. So this is really a creative writing exercise and for you to tell a story on how your work does that.
Okay, so we're going to make you all get to work right now. We're gonna help you rip off the Band-Aid and start writing your first draft of the Individual Artist Fellowship. So we have 3 questions about community engagement from the Individual Artist Fellowship application. They are community engagement and impact. Describe how your work engages community. The second one is, has your work influenced social change on a local, regional, or statewide level? Describe how. And the third one we have listed is, as an individual artist, which cross-sector organizations at the local and or regional level have you built relationships with? This can also include initiatives you are aligned with and have personally worked on. So Richard, if you can give like a 30-second to 1 minute definition of a cross-sector organization. I really think that they're just referencing like any community-based organization.
Essentially, yes. And frankly, Bernie kind of touched on it in her own application there as she talked about the cross-sector involvement between, that she was working in alignment with her application. So it's really cross-sector just basically means that intersection where your art intersects with initiatives or projects or things that are necessary within the community, homelessness, belonging, mental health, civic engagement, so many different places that are in there that can be. And even working within a cross-sector organization, it's not like you have to be aligned with the Red Cross, for example. It's really who have you connected with so that when you are answering a question that is important to the community, that you're also not approaching it just from the eyes of the artists, but the eyes of the organizations that are helping the same community that you're trying to help. I don't know if that makes sense.
I wanted
Okay.
to add to that I feel like for cross-sector work, how I would personally answer this question, I would probably incorporate like education, arts education, and accessibility can also be part of that. Also, if you have partnered with like local nonprofits before, this is a great place to put that information or that partnership. If you have partnered with like other local independent businesses, if you have partnered with like a bookstore or stuff like that, you can include those partnerships in this question. Again, it really depends on how you tell that story, on how your work has impacted your community.
Wonderful. Thank you, Richard and Bernie. So let's take 10 minutes, choose a question, break it down to its simplest parts, like we discussed recently, and take notes on each part. And if you finish, go on to another question, and we'll be back in 10 minutes to discuss.
And if I may just chime in one time, don't overthink it, people. You let your artistic gut, your artistic instinct help you to formulate your answers at this time.
You have about one more minute to take your note and start thinking about volunteering to share your notes if you took some. Don't make me call on Jaya again.
And again, these don't have to be perfect responses. I usually take like bullet point notes, very simple bullet point notes just to get the ideas rolling.
I can
Yeah, and but go
share.
ahead.
My name's
Sure.
Estelle.
Hi, Stella. Thank you.
So I answered the question, community engagement and impact. Describe how your work engages community. So I hope I got this okay. I know it's not perfect, but the manner in which my work engages community and makes an impact is by sharing culture, emotion, and spoken word with others who may align with my sentiment, who are being seen by the repetition, of my voice and song, and who feel validated by this connection. Also, my voice, whether written or sung, can inspire others to raise their voice, to speak about culture, advocacy, and beauty of the human spirit. I have sung poetry at mural dedications and had others reach out to me and say they were moved by my compositions, which may use native language. Led poetry workshops via Zoom for the Los Angeles Public Library as well as the Santa Cruz community. Another way that I hope to inspire my work is through engaging communities that are not as visible or validated in music, such as the senior community. As a singer, it is important that I continue my work as a composer and inspire any age to believe that anything is possible, that limiting our beliefs stifles our creativity and human connection.
Justina, you're muted.
That already feels like a first draft, Estella. Thank you for sharing. So, if any of you were intimidated by Estella's answer because it did sound it was actually very beautiful. Don't be intimidated. It can be a lot messier than that. Some advice I would give to you, Estella, is to just provide some specific examples of, like you mentioned, collaborating with a library. What exactly was the workshop? Think about some impact that came out of it. Even panelists love numbers. 20 school children between the ages of 12 and 18 attended this workshop. Talk in specifics about who you served, what impact it made. I always like to, with my projects, I usually have a pre-survey before I do the project and a post-survey after I do the project. And it could be something simple where I might ask, like my some of my work that deals with behavioral health. So I might ask before people participate in the project, how are you feeling? And then after they participate in the project, how are you feeling now? So something that I could include is that when I did this project to help people relieve stress, 100% of participants noted that they felt less stressed after participating. So that's another, it's giving you a number, it's giving you data and specificity.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anyone else? Has anyone worked on another one of these questions that you'd like to share?
Sure.
Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
I want to make sure I was demuted for a moment. I kind of did the same thing where I just started writing sentences, and they're going to need some work, but here we go. My previous solo show, Mind for the Tribe, initially performed for around 100 people in Sacramento in 2024. Throughout 2025, I got to travel to the Hollywood Fringe and San Francisco Playgrounds Free Play Fest. The Los Angeles Fringe led to traveling, continuing the show in Los Angeles at an encore presentation at the Actors Company and at a couple of Unplugged Fest LA presentations, as well as an award that led to a performance of it in Ventura, California with NAMBA. But it wasn't just a show. Surprisingly and inspiring to me, I didn't just get to share a vision of mental health and the arts with an audience who came to see the show in those four cities. but with those who wanted to continue the conversation afterwards in chat, over the phone, um, in talkbacks in parking lots or diners because something in the show made them want to talk about their own journey as a weirdo kid, their history with grief, or just finding their way as artists after choosing a different career. I love the ability to not just share a show with around 1,000 Californians, but to potentially have helped tens of people by starting a conversation about mental health. Though this feeling of being challenged and seen by a piece of art has happened to me, I hadn't quite had the experience of creating it and seeing that look in audience eyes. I want to expand that with this next piece. Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
Sorry about that. I'm trying to not disturb while you are providing your example.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you for sharing that. And I think I love all the specificity in there. I was wondering, which question were you answering? Was that the first one as well?
I was aiming, I was aiming at the second one, starting at local and then going statewide. Um, but I could see how
Okay,
that would be confusing.
so I would definitely, yeah, that's fine. I'm like, what question is he answering? So for that one, I would be more explicit about how your work has influenced social change. Be You could literally say in a question, this will make it really easy for panelists to understand your answer, is to use the words in the question and the answer. So I would just kind of parrot the words and say, my work has influenced social change on a local level through this.
May I ask a follow-up question on that?
Yes.
Thank you. Um, I mean, often enough in the arts, I don't know what the effect actually is. It's not as though you know what I'm saying? We don't necessarily sell a product, or we don't know if anybody went in, like mine was about mental health in the arts. I don't know if anybody went into therapy the week after the show or anything like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, how would you best show that you've actually influenced social change, I guess is.
I think you do that by referencing the conversations that you have. And you could say what you hope comes out of it. You could include if you, when you do your projects, your art projects, if you're telling the participants or people who are viewing your art what your goals are. Um, I only want to give like one more minute to the slide, but I was wondering if Bernie or Richard would like to chime in on that because it is kind of a complex um, challenge to describe how your work influences social change, and I'm still figuring that out for my own practice.
As I was listening to your response, you had mentioned something about having conversations with people after uh, they experience this piece that you produced. So if you can recall some of those conversations and incorporate that in your answers, that would be a really great way of providing a tangible example of what this like social change is.
Oh,
Um,
appreciate it. Thank you. That makes sense. Thank you.
and then also, you mentioned like mental health, like in terms of like initiatives, that's a very clear initiative to me.
Appreciate it.
Is there anyone to, thank you, Chris, in the group that does feel like they have a solid idea of how their art influences social change that would be willing to share with the rest of us to help us out?
I can share.
Yes, please.
Um,
What's your name?
this is Janini. Hi.
Hi. Hi,
Okay.
Janine.
Oh,
Hi. So a lot of my body of work centers on spotlighting elders and I guess called older adults. I don't like the word seniors. And this is a population widely ignored. And so the mission of my work is to put the elders in the place where they um, have historically been in the development of humankind, which is at the most important place in our society, not the least important, where they're found today. And so I guess my work is inspiring social change by focusing on the elders and their stories.
Yes, for sure. And you're sharing the value that you see in their stories. You're helping other people see the value and appreciate them and the value that they contribute to society. So thank you, Janine. That's a wonderful example. Itzin, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, so please correct me if not, but I see your hand is up, so feel free to share.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Thank you. And you pronounce it correctly. It's fine.
Yay.
So I just have a little draft of what I wrote, and maybe your feedback is gonna help me out. I tried to answer the community engagement and impact question. So I wrote, my work contributes to social impact through arts education and storytelling that makes internal experiences visible, focusing on themes such as identity, emotional experience, and human relationships. I engage community through collaboration, education, and participation in local art spaces. In Sacramento, I support initiatives such as the Sacramento International Film Festival and the Sacramento TheaterCon, where I assist with production, coordination, and artistic activities. I often contribute by helping projects move forward, offering feedback, and connecting artists with similar goals. My approach focuses on reducing isolation and making collaboration more accessible, especially for emerging artists who might not know how to enter those creative spaces. In Costa Rica, where I'm from, I work with la Asociación Arte para Ayudar, delivering theater workshops in partnership with the Patronato Nacional de la Infancia, which is like the child services agency. These programs use performance to support youth in developing communication skills, confidence, and emotional awareness, and in public presentations for their communities that help these youth develop communication, confidence, and emotional awareness through creative expression, reaching communities with limited access to arts education. I am currently working towards youth-focused film programming festival and workshops in Sacramento to help artists learn, collaborate, and access opportunities like this one that we're having right now. So that's what I wrote.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, you're definitely on the right track. And I'll let Bernie and Richard respond too. But I think the only thing that I felt could strengthen that would just be again to be you are very specific but to even get more specific and almost simple. Like I like to tell people, imagine that you are explaining your art to a 10-year-old. You're gonna be if you're explaining it to a 10-year-old, how would you tell them about what's happening in the workshops? How you're like specific things that you're doing with the youth. That would be my advice. Bernie or Richard, do you have any advice?
Listening to your response, I felt like the last half of what you had written was really specific and strong. The first part, you were mentioning themes that were a little general, like when you're talking about like identity and emotion and things like that. And this can go for everyone too. Those are the parts where you can really benefit from being specific. As in, if you are including artwork or let's say documentation from events that you have worked in the work examples, to reference those as like this piece is talking about identity and this is how it talks about identity, like and then you had mentioned organizations that you partnered with and the youth focused the wanting to develop youth focused film workshops. As someone who works in the film industry here in Sacramento, I feel that that's really strong. You should definitely include that.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
I think the way that you took notes is wonderful. This is what this notes and journaling portion or stage is for. You will have vague and general ideas in there, but Bernie, could you go to the next slide?
Mhm.
When you're editing is what I think is the most important part of the grant writing process. This editing process, and I suggest you have someone peer edit your draft. We'll have a peer editing session in Sacramento coming up, or you could ask a friend or a loved one or a colleague to peer edit using this editing checklist. We came up with this editing checklist based on our own experiences applying to grants and helping artists apply for grants. So you'll take your notes, you'll write your first draft from your notes, and then you'll go through your editing checklist. And I would write at least 3 drafts. So you have your first draft, a second draft, and then a third draft. So you might want to peer edit your first draft. I mean, edit your first draft yourself. And then once you have your second draft, give it to another person to peer edit for you. So the
Uh,
first, yes.
I wanted to just add that when I am asking someone else to peer edit, I usually ask someone who is not an artist, even though like grant panelists can be many different types of people who work in different sectors. So I have my partner is generous enough to edit my writing. He is not an artist, so he's able to tell me when things are confusing and need more clarity. So if that's helpful, I would ask someone who's not an artist to edit your document.
Or someone who's maybe they're an artist, but they're not the same artistic discipline as you. For instance, my husband is a musician, but I'll have him pair edit my applications because I am primarily a visual artist. So he can be like, I don't know what this painting term is, and he can flag that for me to make sure that I define it for the reader. One of the things that he always says to me, because he's also a lawyer, he says, "Is this a term of art?" Like when I use a specific technical term, and I'm like, I guess. So yeah, you'll have by asking someone to peer edit that's not super familiar with your discipline or your practice, they're going to flag things that could potentially be confusing for the panelists. So I'm not going to read all the text on this. You have this. I suggest that you have this list open as you're editing your drafts and go through each of these separately. So I go through each one, I read through the whole essay, looking at one, are all the question parts answered? I look at all the questions and see if all the question parts are answered. I leave myself notes. I'm usually working on a Google document, so I'll leave myself comments. Or if you're having a peer editor do it, have them leave your comments, or you can even sometimes it really helps me when I'm getting tired of looking at screens to actually just print out my answers and take notes directly on the page. The second thing I look at is if there is any repetitive language. Grants always have character limits or word limits. So you want to make sure that everything that you're including is impactful and specific to your practice and not repetitive. So it doesn't have to be exactly the same to be considered repetitive. It could be 2 sentences that express the same idea with different words or examples. Number 3 is to remove anything that's unrelated, general, or common sense. This is also related to the fact that you have limited space and also limited patience from grant reviewers. So you want to make sure that everything in your answers is relevant. I suggest not using something like in your answer, I've been creating art since I was a child, because that's something that's pretty common or general to a lot of artists. So once again, you want to be really specific to your own practice. 4, are there overcomplicated or confusing sentences? The first step is to identify them. If it's really long, and complicated, you could probably simplify it or break it up into multiple sentences if it has multiple ideas. If two sentences have the same idea, they're probably repetitive and could just be one sentence. Number 5, where is more context needed? So this is, for example, if you're talking about something technical, um, I'll just say, trying to come up with something off the top of my head, but I would, if I'm saying I use the slab technique for my ceramic work, I would describe what that is, just very briefly. Like I roll up the clay to make a flat tile as a canvas for my ceramic work. That's not the best example, but I hope that helps with that. And also, another note about context is that it's a great idea to make sure that you describe your artwork so that the reader can imagine it in their mind's eye, because they probably will not be looking at your images as they're reading your answers. 6, does the order make sense? So a good rule of thumb is to keep your sentences, paragraphs in chronological order or move from general ideas to specific. So if you say that you are engaging youth in the community through workshops, you start with that and then go into the specific workshops or the specific youth that you're engaging. And then finally, the last thing I do is check for typos and grammar issues and correct them. And writing is always more clear if you're using the active rather than the passive voice. I'll give an example of that in a bit. So these are some tips that we have come up with to help you make your application stand out, because this is very competitive. There are going to be a lot of applicants. We want to give you the best chance that you have to be awarded this and other grants. So I think we've said it like 20 times, but be specific. For example, if you write that you are fulfilled by working with community members, explain what is fulfilling about the experience. If there is a rubric or criteria provided, make sure that you have touched upon everything before you submit it. So this is actually a good exercise for peer editing too, is to have your peer editor actually score you based on the rubric to make sure that you touched upon everything that you can. And not every artist will touch upon everything in the rubric, and that's okay. It's the rubric is meant to balance out the applicants. Make sure, even if it doesn't explicitly ask you to describe your artwork at the beginning of the application, try to get some basics about your artwork at the very beginning and what it looks like, so that the reader has context for the rest of what you're telling them. Use the active, not the passive voice to be clear and confident. So with the active voice, the subject of the sentence performs the action. For example, I communicate through my art is better than art is my way to communicate. So start early. You're all already doing this step by being here today and working on your drafts with us. You want to give yourself enough time to let the ideas percolate between drafts and to write multiple drafts. Make sure that you adhere to all grant requirements and instructions. So look at the file types, formats, if there's any file name, expectations, make sure that you're following all that to a T, because that's an easy way to get the maximum points for that rubric item, but also an easy way to lose points if you don't follow those guidelines. Ask someone to review your draft and provide feedback, and I suggest they use our grant editing checklist. Make sure that you're answering all questions completely. A really important one, upload the maximum number of work samples. For example, if you have a limit of 10 work samples, upload 10 work samples. Do not upload 5 work samples. You want to maximize the amount of information that you're providing about your artwork. If asked for an optional reference letter, which is not asked for on the individual artist fellowship, just view it as mandatory and include a letter, because it's always going to strengthen your application and make you stand out from the applicants that do not include a letter. And I'm gonna turn it back to Bernie.
So that concludes the workshop portion of this presentation. We have included here several QR codes for you to pull up right now if you wish, or later. Again, you have access to these slides and all of the Tonic tools that we've provided so far. The QR code on the left will take you to the landing page for the Teatro Nagua on the Teatro Nagua website. That landing page will have the live applications on May 4th. So you want to go back to that website in order to access the application portal. The QR code on the right is more artist support workshops. All of these workshops are for free and they are catering to this individual artist fellowships. The next one that we have, which is on May 6th, right after the applications go live, will be the guideline info session. The following Wednesday on May 13th, we will be going over the art aesthetic perspectives document that articulates the social impact of your work. So using these attributes for excellence in arts for change, there are 11 definitions that they've outlined, and it would be really great for your application to put your work in context with one of these attributes. The workshop that's on May 20th is going to be an in-person peer editing lab that will take place at Clara Studios. The last workshop on May 27th will be our virtual office hours. And this is just for you to get any like last minute clarity, last minute help before you submit your application. The registration website is arttonic.corsizio.com. Again, all of these workshops are free. Please register for as many of them as you can. We will be recording every single session. So if you are not able to attend for any reason, all workshop registrants will be getting a recording. So you want to make sure that you are at the very least registered for the website, for the workshops. If anyone has any outstanding questions, now is the time to ask them. Feel free to put your questions in the chat or just unmute and just fire off your questions. I think we have about 10 minutes left on this Zoom call, so we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. Yes, Rachel?
Hello. I had a question about the questions, like the narrative questions for the application. More specifically, like if you've uh like kind of pivoted like industries. Like for example, I've been in the nonprofit sector several years ago, but now I am pursuing my art and more specifically fiction writing. Um, because of the word count for each question. Like, I guess what are your thoughts or suggestions on I know we have to be very specific and it's pretty limited. So like navigating storytelling of I guess like examples of work experience, but still really getting to the heart of the questions.
Is there a specific application question that you were referencing for the narrative part? In terms of incorporating are you asking if you can form a narrative that incorporates like the previous work within the nonprofit sector and how it relates to your art?
Yeah, so maybe specifically, um, like maybe question number 6 as an individual artist, the more so like the cross-sector organizations at the local or regional level. Um, like I guess if there's like if my work currently is different from my past work experience. I mean, is it beneficial to just focus on the art itself and the work I'm doing currently, or kind of touching a little bit on like, oh, like just briefly like bridging that, I guess. Yeah. Hopefully that makes sense.
I think just to chime in a bit, I think if it relates to your current artistic practice, yes, you could include it. But if it's not related at all, I would leave it out.
Okay. Thank you.
But if your work with certain communities is finding its way into your artwork or your cultural work, I think it would be really great to include that.
Okay. Thank
Does
you.
that make sense to you, Bernie, as well?
Yeah, my one note on that is that if your previous artwork was related and had community impact and was related to this like nonprofit work that you were doing,
Mhm.
if there was specific work that you can reference that was aligned with the community impact of this nonprofit work that you were doing, I would include that as an example. But if it's not at all related to your art practice now, I would follow Justina's suggestion and not include it. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
And if I may just chime in as well, because Rachel, I think this could help with a deeper one-on-one conversation. So feel free to reach out to Justina or myself on the Calendly thing, and we can do some one-on-one work, understand a little bit more about your previous work, understand your current work, and maybe provide some direction or guidance for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking. Anyone else have any questions? We have about 5 minutes left. And then you can also, like Richard said, you can schedule a meeting on our Calendlies with me or Richard, or you can email us at the IAF at Teatro Nagual email. Jaya has a question. Yes, Jaya.
Yeah. And I think that, let's see. Okay, ADHD brain. Here we go. I literally had the question, and I think that you touched on it a little bit with the previous one, but as a multidisciplinary artist, I find that when I'm doing apps, it's tough to know which lane I want to stay in to have it be the strongest application. Although, like over the overarching part of my practice, I would say I can connect with like all of these questions. So as a multidisciplinary, like for instance, murals versus studio work, um, and then like for instance, what Rachel was describing, her work in the nonprofit, like me with advocacy, it's like um, I'm wondering, would it be a stronger app for a multidisciplinary artist to focus on one discipline? That's one question. And then I think you mentioned, did you say that there's a project attached to this grant? And why am I like not getting the memo on that?
There's no project
Yeah,
associated with this grant, but you could reference, to be specific, you could reference previous projects that you did or projects that you're working
okay.
on now. Yeah.
All right. It switched in my brain when you said
It's
that.
okay.
Okay. I was like, wait.
So the first question was, if you're a multidisciplinary artist, would it be better, quote, better to focus on one discipline? My take on this, I did not do that in my application. And I think the focus of the IAF is really to communicate your impact in community. And I'm like a little bit familiar with your practice, Jaya. So I think my suggestion would be, I think your advocacy work is related to murals, is related to painting. You can include all of those. Yeah.
And if you're talking as an established or legacy artist here, if you're applying to those tiers, the California Arts Council suggests that you talk about how you support fellow artists. And I know just from knowing you that your advocacy work supports other artists and other muralists. So I think that would be really valuable to include.
Also,
Um,
if I may add before we get
yes.
to Jory, and Jory, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing your name, but before we get to Jory, Jaya, may I also suggest that as you are thinking about this in regard to what would present the strongest application for you, talk to others too. As you put this narrative together, even if it's not a complete one, ask people, which of these do you think is the strongest?
Mhm.
And really talks to what I do, how I do, why I do, and the impact it is. Because trying to break that down into 250 words or less can be challenging, but kind of like what Julie was saying there, where Bernie was saying about I let my partner read it because they go, okay, don't quite get this, and it's not clear. So have others read it too, Jaya, and offer you some of the feedback.
Okay, we have a couple minutes. Jory, would you like to ask your question? Then we'll wrap up.
Hello, were you referring to me? Sorry, Jorihuel.
Yes, would
Oh,
you
okay,
pronounce your
sorry.
name for us,
No,
please?
that's my email. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to change
Oh,
it.
it's
It's
okay.
like I don't know why it's there.
What's your
Hi
name?
everyone, Jocelyn.
Oh,
Oh,
Jocelyn.
Jocelyn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi,
Okay.
Jocelyn.
Hi. My question is this open to people regardless of their citizenship status, or like how does that work?
Oh,
Richard.
George.
Um, the short answer to your question is yes, as long as your work status is in order.
Is the eligibility mostly based on residency? So if the
Correct.
artist can
Correct. So as long
provide
as
proof of residency, then you are eligible.
it's proof of residency, but the thing to require, and may I ask you, let's do this rather than go into the details here because I'm not a lawyer, but I play one on stage. Please feel free to reach out to me directly because I also work in that sector a lot. So please reach out to me directly and let's talk more about your specific situation.
Okay, thank you, Richard.
Of course.
Should I put
The IAF at teatronahual.com. Just send me off an email. Hey, Richard, this is Jocelyn. I was one that brought the question in regard to citizenship. When can we talk?
okay, thank you.
I pulled up the last slide here that has the email and the QR codes if you want to schedule some one-on-ones.
Yeah, please stay in touch. We've mentioned the email address a bunch. We're all checking that. We are not the California Arts Council. Richard at Teatro Nagual was hired by the California Arts Council to administer this grant, and Richard hired us at Art Tonic to help him provide artist support. So we have we support the California Arts Council, but we're really here to help you submit the best application that you possibly can. We really want you to succeed. We know this is very competitive, but we think it's worth it for you to apply. So the state, because the California Arts Council is our state agency, we want them to know how many wonderful artists are in the capital region. And by applying for this grant and other grants, even if you don't get them, which we're not going to get the majority of grants we apply to, that's just how competitive they are. Applying to these opportunities helps you learn how to communicate your art, and it can even help you advance your practice because you're starting to think critically about your artwork. And we are at 8 o'clock, so we'll end. But if Julie or Richard, you have any closing thoughts, feel free to share.
Just for myself, I want to say thank you to everybody. Um, I will be, this is just one of many opportunities where we, with our Tonic, with others, can grow this community of artists together so we can share resources, share ideas, share opportunities, and uplift each other, whether we get the grants or not. I can tell you if you follow Art Tonic, they are wonderful at providing information about other funding opportunities that are out there, other workshops that are out there. We try to do the same thing with Teatro Nagual, so it's important for us to organize and share with each other. So this will not be the last time you will be hearing from us.
Agreed. Just as a closing note, we will be sending out the recording of this workshop. And then I think in that same updated memo and updated email, I will put another copy of this slide presentation deck with the current changes that Justina made.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Please connect with us. Have a great night. Glad it was helpful.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.